Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special session where we're reporting back as to where we're at with local government reorganisation. And thank you very much to councillors for coming along early. This session is being live streamed, so I'm expecting that people will be watching it either now or in the future. So I'm going to start off with some of the obvious things that most people in this chamber know. That is that the government is abolishing councils like Lancashire County Council, Pendle Borough Council, and they are to be replaced with unitary councils which will provide the full range of local services. In Lancashire, this means that the 15 existing councils, including 2 unitary authorities, will be replaced with single-tier bodies. There are several options being considered, ranging from just 2 councils covering the whole of Lancashire, which would have over 800,000 residents as far as we're concerned, and 3 or 4 bodies where we would end up in a council with over 500,000 residents. Lawrence will be telling you a bit more about the process that has been going on in recent weeks and months to find out facts and get an evidence base for the proposals being put forward. I'm championing keeping local government as local as possible. With a new council of just over 250,000 residents, the Pendle area currently has 100,000 residents. That's the sort of size that we ought to be aiming for, and a Burnley, Pendle, Rosendale configuration would deliver that, together with similar sized authorities elsewhere in the county. Keeping local government local means that a council that will be relevant and responsive to local needs, with representatives for recognisable neighbourhoods, rather than for a vast conglomeration of towns overseen from afar, where local voices will be lost. A local council will be able to modernise services and use digital innovation to make improvements and cost savings. It will be agile and able to achieve results instead of just trying to turn a supertanker-sized body around. And a local council will be able to sort out the faltering social care and education services, such as SEND, adult social care, Ofsted ratings that the current county council has. National studies have shown that the sort of size body that we are proposing are the best size, the optimum size, in order to be able to deliver results. Local councils, as we're proposing, will have fair shares for all, with an equitable spread across the whole of the county, rather than assets being concentrated to the disadvantage of other parts of Lancashire. And local councils will reflect the existing economies across the county, not create artificial areas with remote and unresponsive decision making. Local councils of the size that we're proposing are in the Goldilocks zone. Small enough to care, big enough to cope. They are just right. I'm going to hand over to Lawrence now, who's going to dive into detail, and then we'll have an opportunity for comments and questions around the room. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Leader. As the Leader's outlined, there has been an awful lot of work that's gone on over the past months between the 15 councils, and not just on the 2, 3, 4 and 5 models, but also looking at how we establish a database that we can all use, so that we're all using the same information to create whatever those models are. I think it's fair to say that many of our officers within the council and the other councils have been involved in this, whether it's data on services, finances, economy, planning, etc., etc. So there's been a lot of work that's gone on in the background, not just on the cases themselves. But what I want to do is to concentrate on the 5 model and the work that's been ongoing at the moment. So there's a number of things that we have been looking at, and I'd start with sort of the strategic objectives. And those strategic objectives are what we are trying to achieve through LGR. And very simply, those are localism to enhance democracy, community, identity, and place-based decision-making. The potential for economies of scale without losing local focus. Outcomes for our community and not just savings. Maximising the devolution opportunities through the mayoral combined authority, and how we might be able to not only drive some of that agenda, but how also it comes from the bottom up as well as from the top down. And how we can create balanced representation across a footprint to strengthen the diversity and cohesion of our communities. That we respect the entrenched cultures and communities that we already have in Lancashire, and particularly of what we are expressing in the 5 model. And also doing things differently, because as the leaders outlined, some of the services that we currently provide and some of the outcomes that we have for Pendle and beyond are not as good as we would all hope them to be. So those are the strategic objectives of why we are looking at what we're looking at. So based on those, and based on the government criteria, we've also looked at what good looks like. And just on that criteria, to give you an example, things like a single tier of local government. Well, what does good look like in that area? And we've been working on that particularly around the 5 model. The right size for efficiency and resilience. Again, looking at the 5 model in terms of being able to achieve that criteria set by government. High quality, sustainable services, joint working and local support, supporting devolution, and stronger community engagement. So all of those are the criteria that the government has set down for us to be able to achieve through this process. So if I can then sort of just go on to some of the overview of, again, a little bit of the work that's gone on. What we've had to do with all of the data is to aggregate all of it together to then disaggregate it into the different 15 authorities. So all the county services, all the services that we provide, we have to bundle them all together and then split them on a basis so that every district has its own budget. Because then we can look at, through the 2, 3, 4 or 5 model, we can pick what ours is, and the leader has talked about Pendle, Burnley and Rossendale. We can pick those 3 elements out and we can see what we believe at this moment in time a unitary authority of that size would look like in terms of its financial approach, its service delivery and all those other things. What we've also looked at is the geography, the population, earnings, health outcomes, economic corridors. I have to apologise, I was expecting to be able to give you some slides, but unfortunately we've had a change in date. I should have had them yesterday, but it's been changed till tomorrow. But what you are getting is the very much most up-to-date information, but I didn't want to give you slides that may have been out of date by tomorrow. So forgive me for the verbal update. But when you are able to see those slides, you will see very clearly from a 3D model of the economy of Lancashire that there are 5 clusters. They are around ourselves and Burnley, Blackburn, Preston, Blackpool and Lancaster. So again, The economic clusters are very clear in terms of that there are 5. If you want to bring 2 together, then that's okay if you wish to, but certainly it gives a very good indication as to where we're at. Yesterday at the Growth Lancashire, we were presented with a map that showed the growth areas, and I think it was really clear that there is a growth area that runs through those councils that the leader has mentioned. There is another one that runs through Blackburn and Ribble Valley, and another one that goes up the centre and one on the west. So again, all of these things are indicating that a 5 model has the ability to be able to deliver, certainly on an economic growth basis. What we've also looked at then is the opportunities. So what are we currently doing, but what could we do better in terms of assisting all of those council plan objectives that we've got and others will have in terms of our economic opportunities. And what we're also doing is looking at the challenges. So in terms of the opportunities, how do we enhance those opportunities? But also in terms of the challenges, what are we going to do to turn those around to become the opportunities of the future? So that's a lot of the work that's going on in the background. That's what we're doing in terms of the 5 model. In terms of services, we have been looking at over 250 services and trying to map where they are, what they look like, how they look today. The work to be done now is how they might look in the future. But I think it's fair to say we have spent some time looking at adults, children's services, housing and homelessness, because those are 3 big areas that we, as a 5 unitary model, would want to make sure that we're very clear on what the current position is and what we might do to improve on those positions and improve on those positions for our communities. We look at demand, we look at the current provision and how it's provided, we look at the costs, and we look at the budgets. So again, that's another area that we're working on, and we will have all of that included in the business case when it finally comes. In terms of finance, I've already talked about the baseline for everyone. But what we also need to do is to work on what it would look like for a 5 model. And Karen and her team have been assisting across the county with the Section 151 officers to come up with a baseline that we can all use. And I'm pleased to say that they've been able to do that. There are some assumptions that need to be made so that we've all got one working document. But I'm confident that the information that we've got will also contribute to a strong 5 model. And I think at this stage, it would be difficult to not compare that model with the others in a favourable light. We've yet to get the full final figures, but as soon as we've got them, again, they'll fit into the final narrative. A couple of things that we probably still need to do. The leader is very keen, as is Burnley, in terms of looking at localism, and we mentioned that earlier on in terms of one of the criteria about local democracy, local decision making and local engagement. We have to put a narrative into the business case as to what that localism will look like. The leader has some very clear and good ideas about how we might be able to do that. We've gone to other councils that have gone through this process. We've asked them how they do it. There's different models out there, but I think we're really starting to hone down now into what it might look like for a Burnley, Pendle, Rossendale in terms of the community involvement and how they get involved in decision making, etc., etc. So that's a piece of work that's still ongoing, but will be part of the narrative. I think we're also looking at how we engage with the public. You'll already know that there is a survey across Lancashire, but what we also need to be clear is that it would be advantageous for us to understand from our local communities what they think about particularly the 5 model, and give them an opportunity to feed back to the council, and we're working on how we might do that with Burnley in the very, very near future, and how that might look, whether it's a survey, whether it's focus groups, whether it's all of those things. But we are working on that as we speak. A couple of things that we've yet to work out is around what's called the ethical walls that have been set up. So we've all got the same consultant who has split their teams into a 2 and a 3, a 4 and a 5. At this moment in time, there is no plan for those 2, 3, 4 or 5 at this moment in time to share their information once they've done their narrative. Now, I know from the past that the council has made it very clear about what its position is and what its preferred options are, but at this moment in time we require the leaders of the Lancashire authorities to have that discussion so that they can then decide whether they want to share those models with other councils. Because again, in terms of what you might see at the council meeting, we would want to give you as much information as possible, but that's something that's still yet to be sorted. So just to sort of finish, we should get the draft tomorrow. In October, as I've mentioned, some public engagement, redefining the business case, all of those things that I've talked about, including the localism agenda and finance. We have an ONS at the end of October. We have our council meeting in November. We have our executive in November, and the submission is by the 28th of November. And so what I understand from MHCLG is that once those submissions in, the government will then decide what can go forward in terms of its own public consultation, which it will probably carry out in the new year, and that we should have a decision sometime before the recess next summer. It's quite a long period of time before a decision is made. Then what you're into is how you manage that programme, how you set up your joint committees and shadow authorities, the previous presentation that I made to members. And so the timelines are all there. So everything is on target, it's tight in terms of the submissions, but I'm confident that we'll be able to match all of those. And I'm very confident that your incoming Chief Exec, Dean, has also been involved and engaged in all of the aspects that we've talked about throughout the last couple of months. So he will be fully up to speed when he starts on the 6th of October. So I'd like to leave it there, Leader, for now, and happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing on this. Kevin, Councillor Salter.
Thanks. When you put the submission in by November, has it got to be detailed in as much, for example, if it's going to be Pendle, Burnley and Rosendale, do you have to go as far as centralised location for the council, the division of representation?
Representation, yes.
Yes, but it's not a huge amount of detail at this stage, but in terms of representation, you can, in your submission, say what you wish to see as a council. There is work that will happen once the government has made a decision, when your civil servants will have conversation with your officers, your shadow authorities, so that you can actually plan out what it looks like. But yes, if you wish to put in your submission what you believe the representation is, there's nothing stopping you doing that. And it's probably a good thing to get early representation in there so that the government knows where your mind is at.
Asjan.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that, Lawrence. It's very positive to hear that, you know, that other districts and also, especially Ash County Council, is now sharing the details of the fine detail that we need to ensure that we're making an informed decision. Because in the early days, they were not, especially Ash County Council, were not prepared to share most of that information. And it's like you touch on Lawrence, that, you know, localism, the community involvement is absolutely crucial. And we want that localism, you know, we want to to be as local as possible. But I mean, I raised this issue at the executive as well last Thursday. The key thing is how are we going to improve the deprivation levels? Because that's the way I look at it. That's one of the reasons that we want to have the local government reorganisation. How are we going to deliver? Like you say, some things we're doing good, some things that we need to improve on. No doubt, some of those unitaries coming together, some of the other local districts coming together will help us to achieve and improve things and services. But adult social care is a big concern. I think some of the unitaries are struggling. Blackburn, Darwin, Blackpool, if I remember correctly, in previous conversations with other district leaders, I think Blackpool is in about £400 million out of borrowing or debt. I'm not sure what level that is with Blackburn. The key thing is, how are we going to improve and tackle deprivation,
Okay.
and how are we going to sustain it?
Yeah. I think the problem with the county council is that it is spread far too thin. So you've got a county council where the number of officers, high quality officers, aren't able to address issues in sufficient depth or detail to be able to address local deprivation, health outcomes, educational attainment. And there's a lot of evidence across the country that the smaller, more agile councils can concentrate their effort on improving those outcomes across the piece. So the issue, to my mind, is to have that focus and that drive, which, let's face it, the different councils, if we get 5 councils across Lancashire, some of them will have other priorities. Now, at the moment, the county council might prioritise issues that aren't at the top of our list for whatever reasons. And by having a truly local body that's responsible for that broad range of services, you can set those local priorities and really hammer them and get the changes and do things differently so that we're actually making the difference that we all want to see. Does that answer your question, Asjad?
Could I add something?
Half and half. Lawrence has got something to add.
Yeah, just very briefly. It's a good question, and I think the leaders already mentioned about our ability to, because of the size, is to focus and target on those issues that are really relevant to our communities. And we have gone to other authorities of a similar size, at $250,000, to ask them, how did you and what did you do to improve the services? And what they've been really clear on is that adults and children's services, they focused on those. And both of those councils in Cumbria, as we used an example, went from requires improvement to good within the first 2 years because of strong civic leadership, targeted resources, and the will to be able to drive all of those things. And again, the leaders talked about digital innovation. There's lots of ways that we'll be able to look at how we might improve those services. But once you are able to see the full pack, as soon as we've got that, I think it will give you a bit more of an explanation. But we have researched that, so we're confident that we know what we need to do to actually achieve those issues that you will have in the council plan.
Ash.
I've been quite clear about my stance on this, and I think that it's important that we follow the data in terms of service delivery rather than wanting to to divide Lancashire on arbitrary lines for the sake of it, because we've done that in the past. Pendle was done in exactly the same way, realistically, when you look at 74. You mentioned earlier about the, I can't remember if it was yourself, David, or Lawrence, that said about the 5 economic activity clusters that kind of make up Lancashire. And you do understand that. But I wouldn't necessarily want to see councils built around that purely because that's where the activity is happening. I'd rather see the opportunities for growth in our area rather than just saying the activity happens there, so we'll build a council and build services around it. I think that there's a bigger picture to look at in terms of how we make it grow, how we look at the skills that support that, how we look at the service delivery around those activity areas. I think just focusing purely because it's already happening and building on it is not necessarily the right thing to do when we've got an opportunity to literally wipe the slate clean as we are in this situation and build afresh. I think it's better to strategise that growth instead. And I think that would then start to answer some of Councillor Asjad's problems or concerns around deprivation. I think that it might be easier to, as we know in this area, one of our key issues is around transport, and I think that unlocking some of our transport issues might be one of the key benefits to unlocking some of our economic issues. And I think that personally, a larger authority would have more sway and more swing in trying to unlock some of those issues rather than a smaller one. If it was, as has been alluded to, Rosendale, Ulls and Blackburn, I think we'd really struggle to, to say, yes, we absolutely want the Skipton to Colne line opening. A bigger authority might have more sway. So I think that, as I say, I don't put my eggs in any basket at the moment, but I want to see the data help us to make the decisions in a proper way. I do have some concerns about this local consultation being based on, and again I expressed this at the executive, being based on a five authority model. I think it's driving people's decisions a little bit. I think if you said to people, do you want a locally run and locally centred council, of course people are going to say yes, absolutely. I think that's the dream of all of us, to have something that's easily and locally accessible. But again, I think that it has to be pinned with some data to support that survey as it goes along.
Yeah, thanks Ash. Just on our consultation, the 15 councils, including ourselves, are carrying out a pan-Lancashire consultation. The reaction that I've had to that from residents and a considerable number of residents is that it's pretty useless, because it's motherhood and apple pie. It goes through a list of questions, is this service important, that service? Well, you tick yes to all of them. And then it gives you very little opportunity for a respondent to articulate what they think about the options that are available to people. So I think our local consultation will hone down on those options, and it won't just be, do you agree with having a local council? It will say, do you want a council that's 2 unitaries with the 800,000, or 3 or 4 unitaries with a population of 500,000. So we'll give those choices there. In terms of the economic areas, I think that's just an indication of the common interests that we have. The travel to work areas, it's where people are actually moving and working and living. So it's that commonality of communities, if you will. And in terms of the broader issue of investment at scale on transport and indeed in the economy, you've got to bear in mind that this change is in the context of combined authorities. So the combined authority that we've currently got, which is Blackburn with Darwin and the County Council, is responsible for the local transport plan, and there's a plan that's going to come out to consultation soon. It's responsible for the growth strategy, the economic issues, and it's responsible for skills. And so within the context of those big strategic issues being discussed at combined authority level, it's crucial that we have strong voices from our part of the county, from the east of the county. If you have an authority that is split north and south, you've got two members of the combined authority, north of Lancashire, south of Lancashire, it's likely that our needs and our voices will just be lost, as they have been for far too long, with the weight of the west of the county sucking in resources. If we have an authority, a set of authorities, say the 4 model, where we have 1 for the whole of East Lancashire and then 3 across the west of the county, this area will only, and the whole of East Lancashire, would only have 1 voice at that table. So one benefit, which we haven't mentioned, is if we've got 2 authorities in East Lancashire, we've got 2 voices at that table. And I think that gives us collectively the strength to resist the centre of gravity that for far too long has been Preston and the West. And I'm hopeful that we will have that ability to influence what happens at the combined authority level. And don't forget, the government are also wanted an elected mayor, and the elected mayor will take some of these things, and it's not devolution, it's actually sucking things up, but we can but hope that there will be some devolution from government that will give extra resources and extra responsibilities that we can employ to make people's lives better here in Pendle and the wider county. Are there any further comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question, sorry, I just picked up on the last part of your speech, Lawrence, in terms of the dates. I think you said that November was the date for submissions, and then we'll get a final answer by recess next year, and that's around this time, isn't it? Next year, is that right? I know there's a number of recesses, but can you just clarify the key dates? Because my understanding was that by the end of the year we'll have at least an answer as to where we're going to get lumbered with. Sorry to use that phrase, but that's what it seems like at the moment.
I think we would hope for a rather quicker response from government, but the last indication, and there has been a change of ministers who were overseeing this process, so there could be changes, but the last indications that we had were that it would be decisions before the summer recess. So that's July next year. And in terms of the time scale coming up, 28th of November is the submission date, and what we're aiming for is a submission from the whole of the 15 authorities, which is likely to contain a number of options, and then it's up to the government to look at those, consult on those, or consult on the ones that they want to take forward, and go forward on that basis. Kevin?
Yeah, just another quick question, David, regarding finance. Moving into the future, and you've got the combined authority using Burnley, Pendle and Rosendale. Have you looked into the financial, I don't know what it's like, the financial situation of Burnley and Rosendale? Will it have any financial effect on the Pendle residents if, for example, there's deficits in other budgets?
Okay. Well, you've got to remember that it's the county council being broken up as well. And as Dad referred to the borrowing of Blackburn with Darwin earlier on, the borrowings of Lancashire County Council are 1.2 billion. So those borrowings would have to be shared out across the piece. When you look at the borrowings of Pendle Council, Burnley, Rosendale, whichever ones you look at, they're a very insignificant part of the whole. And in terms of deficits, if you project deficits, and Karen's been doing and leading a lot of the work on this, the biggest projected deficit of all is the county council. I won't go into the figures because I think it'd be probably a bit too detailed, but Burnley, Pendle, Rosendale, or Ribble Valley, Hyndburn, the districts are very small beer in terms of, mixing the metaphors, the overall ocean. So the figures are there. I think all three authorities are reasonably healthy, but it's the county council that has the greatest projected deficit, and indeed current deficit, and the greatest borrowings. But they have assets as well. £1.2 billion of borrowing, but £3.6 billion of assets. So, one thing and another. Yes, Ruby.
My question's about the engagement that we mentioned in terms of deciding whether it's going to be surveys or whether it's going to be little workshops during the day or in the evening. My question is how are we going to measure how effective our engagement process is? What are we comparing it to? Are we just going to say, yeah, we've got a good number? I think I saw a post that was put on Facebook which said, the insight we've got today was valuable, but valuable, what are we basing that on? Is 10 people that came to a workshop, or 100? What is it overall that we're looking at? And then if we're not getting enough engagement, what is our kind of response to how do we do things differently, creatively, to actually increase engagement? Because it is a big thing, this process that's going to affect the whole of Pendle, but to not have enough engagement, to me, seems like there's something that we need to do to actually increase engagement.
Okay. The proposal is that we have an online survey so that people can fill that in from the phones, and that will be the principal channel for people to give their views. We can supplement that by people having paper copies and the like, but I think the big question mark is in terms of timescale. We've got a few weeks to do this, so we can ask local organisations what their views are. We can go to parish and town councils. We can do all of that. We need to do it in 4 weeks, 5 weeks at most, in order to be able to feed that into the decisions that we're taking and the bid that we're writing to justify and elaborate on what we want to do. I would certainly be very happy if 2,000 or 3,000 people participated in such a survey. I would be over the moon if 5,000 people did it. That would be 5% of the population of Pendle, and if we got 10,000 people filling it in, I would be ecstatic. But I'll have modest ambitions at the moment. But I think the key thing is that we give people an opportunity, give our residents the opportunity to say what they think, because up to press, they haven't been asked. Is there anything further? No. It's 6:25, and we scheduled this for be 3/4 of an hour. So can I thank everybody very much for coming along? Can I thank anybody that's either watching this live or watching this in the future? We are anticipating going live with the online survey in a matter of a few days' time. So I would hope people will watch out for that. Certainly we will be publicising it, and I would encourage everybody, councillors and members of the public, businesses, people with an interest in our area, to get involved. Let us know what you think, and we will use that information to argue for what we think and collectively people in Pendle think is best for our area. Thank you very much, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.